Good morning, Napa Valley. Time for another Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. We love our music there. That is a band called Playing for Pennies. The name of the song is Lost, and my son plays the drums on that.
Yeah, he is.
And it's got a pretty good video, a couple other videos. You can see that at leeanddesi.com.
Yeah, he's a superstar.
Yeah, great photographer. He's in Australia right now.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things he can be taking pictures of in Australia.
Oh, yeah. No,
that's a beautiful country.
He's got some great shots already. So.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, so we are here for another week to talk about real estate and other such things. We thank our sponsor, AmeriFirst Financial, with Martine Yatako, the branch manager there. You can reach Martine at 707-819-0854, as well as our other sponsor, Tom McDonald from Signet Reverse Mortgage, and Tom's at 707-265-6385.
Well, you know, I have to say this because this is my favorite part, but Tom is taking people from where they are to where they want to be. I like that.
Yeah. It's so open-ended.
I love it.
And we're going to have a special guest with us today. We're going to be blessed with the presence of Alfredo Pedrosa, our county supervisor, and he's going to give us some updates here coming up in a few minutes. But we like to talk about what we did on the weekend just to start the show off. And I worked. This weekend.
Work this weekend?
I am a realtor, and I work on weekends. Imagine that. And when I wasn't working, I was doing yard work. So it was always about work. And I'm a little sore from doing yard work this weekend.
You know, that's funny because that's exactly my schedule this weekend. I did a lot of housework, but I also did work and worked even close to the weekend evenings here. I was taking phone calls and so forth and going over things with my clients. So I do work 24/7, 365 days out of the year.
That's the life of a realtor.
But I enjoy it. And we enjoy it. I know that. So that's a good thing. So in the studio we have Napa County Supervisor Alfredo Pedrosa.
Welcome, Alfredo.
Welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
I know I'm catching you off guard.
Not at all. I love the conversation about working 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
I guess
right?
you would know something
it's
about that.
It's very similar to elected officials,
Yeah.
and my wife reminds me of that very often.
Right. Well, you know, there's just, you know, we work for our clients, and you work for the people.
Yeah, you have a lot more clients.
You have a lot more clients than we do, that's for sure.
I often tell people, you know, we work for every resident of Napa County, so we have over 140,000 bosses.
Right.
But it's a good thing that we're very fortunate to be in this position to be able to work for this beautiful county.
That's right. That's for sure.
Hey, before we get into some of the things that you're going to be talking to us about, Alfredo, just want to do a little shout out for Heritage Sotheby's. That's the brokerage that Desi and I are with, and we're having a party on the 30th. And if you're listening to this broadcast, you're invited.
That's right, Alfredo. You're invited.
Yeah, well, he's listening to it because he's sitting next to me, but on the 30th of this month from 4 to 7 at 1435 First Street. That's in the little courtyard behind a notary. We are celebrating 70 years. Heritage Sotheby's has been a local real estate brokerage here in Napa, started by Randy Gallardi's father, and 10 years as a Sotheby's brokerage. So
we look forward to it.
Come say hello, meet Desi and I, meet other agents, meet tons of people in the community, and Alfredo just made a note, so he might be there.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
Yeah,
it's the season, holiday parties, festivities.
Yeah, and I know it's right by a favorite watering hole, Norman Rose.
Yeah,
so.
Right.
You know, part of the job is it's amazing where you get work done.
Right.
Yes,
and you're out there, you know, having a nice glass of wine or a drink. And people will sit and talk to you. And it's so refreshing just to be able to do that. And I think that's the difference about being an elected official in Napa is whether you're having dinner or you're at the grocery store,
Right.
people will approach you. And that's
Right.
part of the job of being on 24 hours a day, 24/7.
Exactly.
Just having casual conversations, but you learn so much
You do.
about what's going on in your community. So
You do.
you're allowed to have a great pulse of what really matters to your residents and your constituency. So
Mm-hmm.
I will be walking throughout town pretty much every day.
Well, that's good. We appreciate that. So you're going to be talking to us about some deadlines coming up, like in the next 5 hours?
Yes, we've heard a lot from a lot of folks about those deadlines to submit the private debris plan. But, taking a step back, you know what? For everyone that lost their home, we are just so sorry
Right.
that folks are going through this. And for District 4, there was a lot of residents that were impacted by that. My wife and I got evacuated, so we faced the same emotional roller coaster ride that people had. But for those that were less fortunate, where they went home and they saw their property completely devastated, that's a hard thing to deal with. So I say that in light of having to impose deadlines, because we understand where we're coming from. But the important part is, we're going to continue to be flexible. The reason we have to put these deadlines is because for every property that doesn't get cleaned up, that's a public health issue.
Right.
So we need to make sure that those that are going to be doing the private route are working as diligently as possible. We understand there might be some labor shortages, but we're still going to be flexible enough, because the example I used, so say my home burned down but yours didn't, you want to make sure that your home is still safe. Right? If you have kids and so forth, you want to make sure that your neighborhood is still safe. And that's part of the debris cleanup that we have to ensure. So that's why we put the deadline of November 20th. Having said that, we're going to be flexible, right? As more things come up, our staff was calling over the weekend every property owner that has not submitted a private debris plan or did not participate in the government program. We were phone banking over the weekend, calling everyone, emailing them, letting them know their options, but more importantly, understand that it's an important decision to make.
Right.
So what other questions that did folks have? I took a call Saturday morning from someone that had still some questions, and were able to rectify those, and they submitted their plan over the weekend. So that's still happening, but I know there's a lot of anxiety out there. Why is it so hard? But that's the rationale of why we're imposing these deadlines, to encourage people to come in and submit as quickly as possible, understanding that there's still questions out there.
So you were fairly successful of those 125?
Yeah, we got more calls,
yeah.
and a lot of it is there's people that are doing the private option, and their deadline is today at 5 p.m. So I anticipate more people that are going to be submitting the private work plans today, and I think that's going to define the universe. And we have a plan for those that surpass the 5 p.m. deadline. There's going to be some follow-ups in terms of what's still pending, what questions do you have, why have you not submitted your work plan, or are you still questioning whether you should participate with the government option. And again, the scenario we're trying to avoid is it's January, February of next year. The Army Corps of Engineers has left with their contractors, and we still have property owners that have not cleaned up their debris.
Right.
It becomes that public health issue, and the resources through the government route are going to be gone.
Right.
So then what do we do as a community? So we're trying
Exactly.
to play some defense here and anticipate some of those scenarios that we don't want to put our residents in our neighborhoods in.
Well, could you tell our listeners what the process is to go through the debris and ash removal?
So one of the things that we fought hard for was giving our residents options. The first one was participating through the government option, right? And the majority of our residents have taken that route. What I can tell you, I was a little concerned about having so many layers of government involved, from the federal to the state to local. But I've been very pleased with how well we've all worked together and how quickly, and I say that in a very positive way with government involved, they've been very active and very quick. It's a chuckle, and I chuckle with everyone, but here's an example of how government works well together, right? I was up, I toured the district again with our family and our son, and he loves the big trucks. But there's so many activities on Soda Canyon, on Atlas Peak Road, on Silverado Highlands, on Monticello Road, equipment moving, right? So that's the government option where the government will do it for you. They give you an advance notice 24 to 40 hours in advance. That process was done through the right of entry. And again, the government does that for you. They're figuring out the billing at a later time with your private insurance. If folks still have questions about that, they can let us know at the county, and we're happy to have that conversation. Even though the deadline was last Monday, we're still willing to engage in that conversation as long as Army Corps of Engineers allows us to continue to submit these right of entry options. The other option was the private option, where people wanted more control of the process, where people felt they could contract with those contractors that had to have specific licenses to do this. So if you're a contractor that's working on debris removal, you have to have specific licenses. You have to submit a work plan to the county that basically shows us your qualifications to do this work and where you're going to be disposing this hazardous material, because that's equally as important. So if you took the private route, your contractor submitted that plan to the county. We basically turned that around in 24 hours. But the important part that we wanted to make sure is that whether you did the government route or the private option, the standards were the same. Because I want to make sure that our sites and our neighborhoods are cleaned up in the same manner. And that one was not quicker or faster. They were both the same. Now, if the private contractor can move quickly, great for them. But again, I've been very pleased of seeing both options work. Our job, what I think, our job as government was to give people options. Right. And I think that's what we were successful at. But I'm very proud of the work we've done. We had over 600 homes that were devastated. And the fact that we've had so many folks submit their applications to do this, and some sites have already been cleaned up. Right. We've seen those sites. Some take 2 days, some take 3 days, some take 4 days. But the important part is giving people that opportunity to rebuild. And that's the objective here.
That's right.
But right now it's making sure that we're cleaning up properties, we're removing debris. And for a lot of people that have had questions about the process and the safety perspective of this, is it safe to repopulate? Is it safe to live next to a home that might have debris cleanup? And I will tell you, I've really educated myself on what all this entails, and it's a very cumbersome process, as it should be. Right. And there's things like they have to water, the site 24 hours in advance to make sure that things aren't going airborne. They have to engineer the site so that way there's no runoff as they're watering, that it's going into a creek or your neighbor's yard. So they have to look at all that. When they take this equipment, they're separating things of what's hazardous, what's not. The trucks that are taking the stuff are tarped so that way there's no airborne activity. All that's happening, and the reason that's happening is to keep our community safe.
Sure.
So that way there's
at
no
the end of the
airborne
day.
activity. Exactly.
Right. That's what's more important.
Job number one.
Yeah. So I guess and part of that whole cleanup process is they're digging in. How many inches or feet are we talking about?
It's all dependent on each site. And some of it is just blank surface, right? There was no foundation walls. Right. There was no slopes. That's a much easier clean than some on Atlas Peak Road where you're seeing slopes that go down.
Yeah.
Some people had wine cellars that were a tri-level.
Right.
So I've seen some cleanups that are 4 feet down that they've cleaned up because there was hazardous material that went down. They're testing soils to that point. And again, these cleanups are different. When you go on Westgate and Silverado, you're dealing with rock. That's a very different type of cleanup. That's
what I heard, right.
Than some that are just soils that are not loose, but soils that can be penetrated, right? So you have to be flexible enough. But to me, again, it's very great to see all the activity and all the people that are out there trying to get this debris cleaned up as quickly as possible. But just because we're going quick, we're not sacrificing the quality. I can tell you that right now.
Right.
Boy, going 4 feet deep, that's going to have yet another issue. You got to bring that back in, right? 4 feet of soil back in. Then you've got to compact it properly, otherwise it won't support a foundation. So that was the interesting thing. I talked to a contractor, and he said there's going to be a lot of foundations being removed that may not necessarily need to be, but the county, the government solution is take them all, because it's, I guess, too cumbersome to do the inspections and the testing of each and every foundation?
Well, no. From my understanding, they are looking at each site uniquely, right? If they feel things can be salvaged, they'll salvage that. Oh, okay. So again, part of it is, you look at Sonoma County, right? The devastation of Coffee Park. That's a very different type of cleanup, right? Where it's pretty traditional, track home development, very different than ours. And that's why, when you look at, we took the Army Corps of Engineers out on Westgate just to show them the example of all these foundations and retaining walls and how that's a different type of cleanup. And if there's things that can be salvaged, we should. Yeah. If there's things that are not, obviously they've been compromised.
Sure.
We'll do that. But part of it is, again, we saw some of these foundations where the common folk will say, that foundation's perfectly fine. Then you dig a little deeper and you see everything's been compromised. All the rebar has completely
been that can melt in.
Yeah, if it
inside.
melts, there's no more structural integrity to support.
But from the common out, when you look at the surface, it looks to be okay.
Right.
Right. But then you go around and you see that, and those are the things that, again, we're doing it right because what you don't want to take one step forward and 3 steps back.
Right.
So that sometimes means a little bit of a slower process, but it's trying to make sure that when people have that opportunity to rebuild, we're all doing it right.
Well, we certainly don't want to, rebuild and later on in the selling process, we find out or we don't find out, and the new buyer takes on something that they're going to have to deal with later on. So it's a
One
good
question I had, the notes that I have here say.
Before you take that question, let's just get to Martine real quick. It's 11:15. We usually take Martine, our financial advisor, or not so much advisor, but our lender from AmeriFirst Financial in Napa. Martine, are you there today? Oh no, maybe not. That sounds like a hang up button.
Yeah,
I just hung up on him. You want to call back? Try again there.
We don't hear dial tone very often anymore with cell phones. So.
No, I'm sure he'll call back. But in the meantime, go ahead with your question, there, Lee.
My question: the notes here say that 38 households are in need of temporary housing, and 20 of those have signed up for FEMA. What can you tell the listeners about the temporary housing? I mean, it's a surprisingly low number, which is good. But where are those trailers going to be, and how is that going?
So we're having conversations about that, Lee. Right now, we haven't quite figured that out yet. Through the local assistance center, that's how we're able to come up with that data. Some of it is rental assistance. Some of it is going to be looking at different means. I think that what we taking a step back is, I think we're very fortunate that we're not going to have the same displacement issue that unfortunately our neighbors in Sonoma County had. Some of the calls we've taken is, I think we're very fortunate and privileged that a lot of the folks that lost their homes are going to have the means to be able to rent and find different homes. The coverage they had allowed them to have rental assistance. So I don't think we're going to see that widespread demand for displacement. But for those that do, we're trying to identify what's going to be the best solution for that. Is it the typical FEMA trailers that they bring in? Is it looking for rental assistance? All options are on the table, but we haven't quite figured that out yet in terms of what it's going to be. Okay. But to the point, though, I think where we might see the housing issue is when we start the rebuild process, and I expect that you might see labor coming in out of state because the demand's going to be pretty significant. Where are we going to make sure that the workforce is living? Right. So that's a discussion we've had with FEMA is, well, how do you accommodate those type of needs? Because if we're going to have labor coming in out of state, they have to stay somewhere. And those are the discussions we're having because we don't want the workforce coming in and competing with our residents for housing as well, because we already have a very saturated and strained housing market, as we all know.
Yeah. Yes, that's for sure. And I know Martine can tell us a little bit about the rates and everything going on today. Martine, are you on the air?
I am. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Martine.
Good morning.
So what can you tell us a little bit about mortgages today and the rates and what people can look for?
Well, I was reading an article, and the Mortgage Bankers Association is predicting that rates will continue rising, saying mortgage rates could pass 4% or even 5% over the next few years. Goldman also increased its current gross domestic product forecasting, saying that GDP will grow to 2.5 next year and reach 3.5 by the end of 2019. So the unemployment rate is predicted to fall at 3.7 by the end of 2018. So, I mean, rates are still low right now. Our jumbo, it's for a 30-year fix, it's at 4% with an APR of 4.125. A conforming 30-year fix, the rate 4.125 with an APR of 4.25%. FHA, VA 3.875 for a 30-year fix of an APR of 4%. So right now it's a good time to get in if you guys are thinking about purchasing a home or refinancing your home. Just like the Mortgage Bankers Association is predicting that the rates are going to increase within the next couple of years.
I keep reading that same information that December, January, we're going to likely see at least a 0.25% increase in rates. So,
well, ultimately, it's still low. And, it's a good time to get in. We're going to see increases in Napa, of course, due to what we're talking about now is homes. People that have lost their homes are going to be looking for other housing, and they're going to be purchasing, possibly either purchasing. We know they're going to rent. Rents are already going up. So at the end of the day, 5% is still low. But it's not going to do that until next year. So my prediction is go out there now and start purchasing.
Absolutely. Save some money now while you can. Supply and demand, prices are going to continue to go up, with everything that took place.
Right. Well, thank you, Martin, for coming on and giving us all that useful information. That's some good stuff. So we'll let our listeners know that that continue to if they need help in the process to call you. You're a wealth of knowledge, and you can help them get that loan.
Yeah, and even if our listeners just want to talk to you and ask some questions, it doesn't mean every time they, if they call you, they have to fill out an application and buy a house. You're there as a consultant as well. And listeners, you can reach Martin at 707-819-0854, AmeriFirst Financial. Thanks, Martin.
All right, so back to Fredo. So you heard those rates, and we have right now we've been dealing with the process of low supply in the county or in the area or in general in California.
Yes, we had Danielle
really
on
low
last week, and she talked about how
it's a low rate environment.
Yeah,
home ownership is just really low, especially in the state. So what is the county doing? Just stepping away from what we were talking about before, what are we doing to get more housing out there?
Yeah, no. So I'm a big fan of housing, and it's very simple. It's supply and demand,
right?
And as you said earlier, the demand is high and the supply hasn't been there as much. So at the county, we're working hard to increase the supply in the way that we can facilitate rebuilding, and in terms of the devastation we've had, one of the things that we've been working hard at the county, and it was instantly as this fire was happening, we were already working on the rebuild process because we knew once people had cleaned up the property, the next natural question was going to be, well, how do I rebuild my home? And how hard is it going to be to go through the process, right? And going back to what I said earlier, this is another opportunity to show what good government can be like, especially from the planning perspective, because I know you guys know that sometimes it can be a little hard to go through the process, and sometimes it may appear very bureaucratic. And what we've done is we really streamlined the process. So one of the things that we can tell you that it's going to be coming, so you get a sneak peek. It's going to be coming before the Board of Supervisors tomorrow is a special urgency ordinance that's really going to streamline the rebuilding process. And what we've said to the community is, if you're going to be building the same home, very similar from a square footage perspective, it's going to be a very streamlined process. We're going to be looking to not apply the septic standards, which in some areas like Soda Canyon, Atlas Peak Road, Mount Veeder, if we applied the new regulation or the new standards for septic system, it would make a lot of properties unbuildable. So we're going to be looking at not having our residents do that. So that's significantly valuable.
Is significant.
Also, we're going to be showing some flexibility with the road and street standards. For some neighbors, again, if they built their home in the 60s, their home burnt down, it's unfair if we applied new standards that make their property unbuildable and not accessible. So we're going to be very flexible with that as we go forward. If there is some non-conforming uses, we're going to be flexible with that as well in terms of, maybe there were 10 feet from the road and now the setback is 50 feet. We're going to be flexible on all those things. And again, that's our opportunity to show that we want people to rebuild, and we want this process to be streamlined and less bureaucratic. And part of the challenge, too, is we provided property tax relief that has been covered before, but very quickly. If your home was damaged or lost completely during the fire, you were able to get property tax relief where the structure value is taken off your property tax roll. So now you're basically just paying for the land. And that is the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
But the county loses revenue.
I was just going to say they take a hit.
So the reason I share that is not just for revenue purposes, but to really illustrate that we're in it together. Because the quicker that people rebuild, the more property tax the county gets, and we need that to keep our services and restore our budget, right? So we're incentivized as well to have people rebuild as quickly as possible, not to add cents and dollars to this tragedy, but really to show that perspective. We want people to rebuild and make sure that the process in government is not getting in the way of people rebuilding their home. So we expect that to be a very streamlined process. Now, some of the questions we get, well, what if I want to add a bedroom? What if I want to expand my home? Well, you should have that option too. And that might be a little bit different, right? That might trigger different standards and regulation, but we'll be flexible enough to understand that. What we've tried to do is streamline for those that want to have what they had. And I think that's what we can show a commitment to.
And the term that I've heard is, I want to make some changes. And it was said, get to the back of the line kind of thing. So can you assure that it's not quite that bad, but it's just going to be a little longer?
Yeah, and it's not going to be get in the back of the line, right? It's going to be, well, what are you trying to add? And for everyone, look, little changes for me may be adding 200 square feet. Little changes for someone may be adding 1,000 square feet. So it's all perspective and subjective to each property, right? So a lot of it is going to be how unique is it to your property. If you're tripling or doubling the size of your home, you know what? That's going to require a different vetting process, as it should be.
Right.
But what we can tell you is we've hired up. We have additional resources at the county now, so that way we're processing applications as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you formed your own department.
Correct.
Right downtown.
And what we've tried to do is work with a group of people that when you submit your application, as you hear, you submit it, it gets bounced back, you submit it again. We're streamlining that process so you have one team that's really touching the application, able to turn it around as quickly as possible. And I'll tell you, we've already had people submit their building plans. So it's exciting to see that. To me, that's recovery in action.
Sure.
That's where it's the new normal for us. But again, what we're doing is passing these urgency ordinance that will be effective immediately. Right? There's no grace period. It's effective immediately to allow people to start that process of rebuilding.
Okay. Yeah, because they need to know that, as far as, where do I go? Do I have to go talk to this person and go there? No, you actually, formed, hired, one-stop shop downtown, get your, submit, and you'll
absolutely
be worked with.
And it's the whole continuum, the whole, process of recovery. The first phase was getting debris cleaned up, and now we knew that it was going to be the rebuilding process, and then that was property taxes, right? And I think I'm very proud of the work the county has done, quite honestly, to really be there with our community and show that we're there with you, and be flexible because, you could be very rigid at times, but this is an opportunity to really demonstrate how well we can work with people and really show the care and empathy that we have for everyone. And hopefully, what I don't want to hear is where you hear the stories, and I've heard some, unfortunately, of not rebuilding, right? But that in itself might be an opportunity for someone else to buy that land and rebuild a new home, right?
Well, as agents, we have received numerous inquiries, like international inquiries. Literally, I got a client from China that, hey, I want to buy some, they have this misperception that Napa has been abandoned and they can come in and swoop up property. And it's
not true.
No,
right.
Absolutely not true.
Yeah. Not at all. I mean, the people that are here want to be here or were affected are going to still want to stay
here. And
here.
those who are not building, it's for personal reasons. Maybe they're elderly and, they were thinking about relocating anyway, so it just kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
For them not
but,
to do that.
Having said that, I think you learn a lot about your community during a crisis.
Sure.
And the way this community has come together has been phenomenal. The generosity of everyone coming together, of helping each other, of neighbors knocking on each other's door to evacuate, right? That's what builds communities. That's what builds neighborhoods. And I think you're going to see that back. It may look different. You may have new neighbors, but at the end of the day, we have good people in our community, and I'm excited about the rebuild process. And what we've said, too, is this is a living document because what we do today, we may find out a month from now that we need to make some added changes, that we need to do some different things, and we're going to do that. This is not a document that we're going to file on the shelf, and we're going to say you either fit in the box or you don't. Right. We've said, look, we understand that the tragedy we experience is significant, and that's going to require some flexibility as we go forward. So this is the first step in the process. We're very open to modifying, changing as we go forward, as we've said. And what we've showed is while some of the deadlines we've had have already passed, we're continuing to work with people.
Right.
But we need to make sure that we're following some processes.
Yes, to be compliant, right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't mind, would you stay with us for the second half of the show?
Absolutely.
Okay. We got to go to break, but I do want to come back and talk about what happens if you don't follow the process. Okay, if you don't comply. So let's talk about that when we get back. Okay, Lee. We're going to be back, okay, buddy? Are you all right with that?
No, I got tons of questions.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
All right. We'll be back on the Lee and Desi Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Lee and Desi Show. I'm Lee W. Miller.
And I'm Desi Capaz.
And we're going to be joined again for the second half of the show, momentarily here, by Alfredo Pedroza. But before we get to that, it's time for this day in history. And I found this one to be particularly interesting. And it's kind of got a little bit of a stretch to it in terms of its connection to real estate. But in 1923, on this day, November 20th, the U.S. Patent Office granted a patent to a 46-year-old inventor, Garrett Morgan, for his 3-position traffic signal.
Wow.
No, that's not Garrett Murphy, the owner of Kitchen Collective and Vintners Collective. That guy's with us today here in Napa. But Morgan,
that was
Garrett
a nice
Morgan.
plug for
yeah,
Garrett.
see how I just threw that in? I told Garrett Murphy that I was going to plug him. I just didn't know how I was going to do it till I looked up this day in history. So before that, there were traffic signals, but there were only a go and a stop. And so
wasn't it like a little sign that
ding?
They
they were
ding,
like little levers that
kind of
came
lever.
up. Yeah, and there was accidents left and right because all of a sudden,
yeah, you had a
yeah. So by the simple process of implementing a third level, that changed everything. Interestingly, he sold the rights to
it
General
made people
Electric.
go faster.
Yeah,
that's
that's what the yellow light's for, is to speed up. But no, he sold the rights to this patent for $40,000 in 1923.
And that was probably
I was curious. Go ahead, take a
somewhat
guess.
of a
what is that worth in today's dollars?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. That's probably a nice wealthy amount there. But what
$571,436 today. And that's what happened on this day in history. But quickly, one more. On a related note, yesterday in 1863, Lincoln delivered a little-known speech, 272 words, known as the Gettysburg Address. Mm-hmm. And why would I mention that yesterday? Because Garrett Morgan, who patented the traffic signal, was the son of former slaves. And he was born in 1877, only 15 years after emancipation. So it all ties together.
Wow, very nice. Well, I remember reciting line for line, word for word, the Gettysburg Address in school. I don't remember.
Right.
I mean, you can't tell me to recite it now,
right.
But 4 scores, and so that one I got the first line, but
right.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. Thanks,
yeah,
Lee.
I thought so. And what's it?
Ding.
That's what.
There you go.
Really quickly, our real estate trivia. Warren Buffett still lives in the same house that he bought in 1958 for $31,500.
Yeah, that is amazing to me to know that story. To live in the same house, very very humble man, but has a lot of money,
and giving it all away too.
And he does, yes.
It's your opportunity to enter our wine drawing. If you just send us an email, leeanddesi@gmail.com, and we will put you in that drawing. Just mention Warren Buffett in the subject line or in an email to us. Last week it was Judy who won, and Mike. 2 weeks ago it was Judy who won, and Mike was our winner this week. So
nice.
See
Congrats.
if you'd like to get a bottle of wine from sending us an email.
And it won't be Charles Shaw either. It'll be something nicer than that.
No, as a matter of fact, Garrett Murphy at Vintners Collective is going to be the one donating the wine to us. So.
Okay. Well, now you know he has good taste, so I'm sure it'll be something
absolutely.
nice. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, our next guest, and always our guest, is Tom McDonald from Signet Reverse Mortgage. Hi, Tom.
Good morning, Desi.
Yeah.
Lee.
Good morning. I bet you have an interesting Did You Know today or something else?
I do, and actually it's a Did You Know that you guys might have a clue about because I've talked about it a little bit before. So did you know that a line of credit option in a reverse mortgage grows over time? That means you have more money to use later on.
So it grows with the appreciation of your home.
It's not tied to the appreciation of your home. It grows no matter what. In fact, it's guaranteed. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that growth can be that guaranteed, but what happens is it's based on the same interest rate you're charged on the money that you actually borrow. And so that's made up of three
Right.
components.
Okay.
An index, which is usually a positive number. It always has been. It got as low as 0.25% on monthly adjustables.
Right.
A margin, which the lender charges. Right now, that's in the ballpark of about 2.5%. And it also includes the MIP, the mortgage insurance premium that goes to FHA, which is currently 0.5%. So you've got 2.25% and 0.5%, 2.75. That's absolutely guaranteed for growth. So think of it sort of as a jumbo credit card in that, let's say you have a line of credit now of $10,000 on your credit card, and you call a year later to your lender, your bank, and say, "Can you increase that a little bit for me?" And they look and they say, "Yeah, you've been
Right.
good credit. We're going to increase it by 5%." So that $10,000 now is $10,500, $10,050. Anyhow, same thing with a line of credit, except it's automatic. It happens. Actually, it's 1/12 on a monthly basis. So, as an example, on a $250,000 home here in Napa, doesn't exist, but I use that because for a 62-year-old, that starts off with a $100,000 line of credit. So that's a nice even number.
Okay.
So you can double that for, say, a $500,000 home. But if that grows at ballpark 5%, that's current expected rates going into the future. 10 years later, that's going to be roughly $173,000 instead of $100. And 20 years later, that's almost $300,000.
Right.
So that by the time somebody's, say, 95 and maybe needs in-home care, although then 95 might be the new 60. Who knows?
I don't know about
There's
that.
going to be almost $500,000 there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just your bank line of credits, your equity lines don't do that.
Right.
This is just built into the product for those who can use the line of credit option, and that isn't always the case. So that's an option. People have to choose it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to know that that's there. It's growing, and you can use it at any time.
Right.
You know.
A lot of people may need the money to pay off an existing mortgage, so
Right.
maybe they don't have all the money in the line of credit. But this is a great option for the borrower who doesn't really need their money now. I've talked about previously on a Did You Know, should you do it now or later? Well, here's a reason to do it now, because later it can be a big number.
And it's ready there, and it could be a bigger number, like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a great Did You Know from Tom McDonald, Signet Reverse Mortgage. Another great consultant. Just call him, ask him questions. He's not going to put the screws to you and try and sell you a reverse mortgage when you don't need one. I know for a fact that he's very honest and ethical because I had him talk to my in-laws, and it just wasn't the right thing for them, and that was very comforting. And you can reach Tom at 707-265-6385, or if you prefer, Tom at reversemortgageconsultant.com.
Thanks, guys.
No problem, Tom. Taking people from where they are to where they want to be.
That's Desi's line.
That's my line.
Likes to read that. Welcome back, Alfredo.
Glad to be back.
Okay, so Desi, you had, I think, the first question.
Well, I just wanted to touch, and talk about, if there are families or households out there that don't follow the process, that are not acting on the deadlines, are not complying, and we hate to talk about this, and what would be the next step for them?
And it reminds me. So before getting in government, I was in banking, and it kind of reminds me of the collection system. That's a last resort that you want to do, and for us, it's going to be a last resort. Unfortunately, we have a responsibility to everyone in Napa County that we clean our neighborhoods up and we remove debris. So before we get to that point, though, I will tell you, and I can say very confidently, there's going to be multiple opportunities for any resident to get in touch with the county, and that's why we're phone banking. Again, we spent Saturday morning and afternoon calling every single person that we can get a number on. We've emailed them. We've mailed them cards. Some of those have been forwarded to P.O. boxes and so forth. We're trying to get all the information, so that way we create these touch points and opportunities to engage with the resident and answer any questions that they may have. In the event that they don't, and say it's now January, February, or sooner, we have to take action. And that might mean legal action. That may be using the court system. to clean up those properties, but we do have a responsibility to those neighbors that were fortunate enough to have their home survive. If their neighbor is not acting, we have a responsibility to both of those neighbors, the one that lost his home, but the one that survived as well. But again, we want to work as closely with fire survivors to make sure that they have all the information they need. And that's truly what our job right now is, provide information so that way people can make an informed decision, an educated decision. But as you said, if they don't, those that do not use a government option for debris removal, or those that don't submit a private work plan, unfortunately, we do have to take action. But we're not there yet right now.
Right.
We've also said, again, we're going to be flexible with deadlines. In some cases, people are out of town. Things happen. We understand life continues. But having said that, you do have to have some actions and consequences on the backside because it's a responsibility to make sure that we clean sites up and that they don't remain a public health issue for our neighbors.
Well, I'm sure the EPA is working with you guys closely. Are they? Are they setting? They're the ones that set the standards, right?
Yeah, and again, they set the standards of the cleanup and so forth, of making sure sites are completely cleaned up so that way you can do the rebuild process. But again, I've been very pleased with FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, EPA. We've all had multiple town hall meetings. We've gone to our residents. Right, we haven't expected people to come to government. Government has gone into the neighborhoods and created these opportunities to ask these questions. As was said earlier, we created the local assistance center where people could go to this. We created a pop-up center where you could go to the county basement and ask questions. We created a phone line that people could go and have that, discussion, basic questions, more technical questions. We've done as much as we can so that way people are informed. But this is, good government also needs to act, and we'll get to that point at that point in time. Right now, we're just trying to beat the rain so that way we clean up as much as we can. We recognize we have ambitious goals. One of the deadlines we've heard from contractors is January 15th. All the work has to be performed, and we've heard from our contractor friends of that is, that's a very ambitious time frame. If it rains, it's going to reduce our workable days. Completely understand that, and again, we're going to be flexible enough. But we need to make sure that work is happening, right? Because, again, the scenario that we're all trying to avoid is January, February, and no work has been started.
Right.
That's when government has to step in on behalf of the other constituents and residents that didn't have any impact of making sure we clean that site up.
Yeah. Alfredo, talk a little bit about, I know that you and Randy Gallardi were working on a list of contractors that have previously done work in Napa County, somewhat streamlining the process for them because they're a known entity. They've, by default, have been vetted, and you know that their quality of work. But you've also just said, and everybody knows, there's no way that the existing contractors in Napa County are going to be able to do all of this on their own. Is it going to be ridiculously difficult for an out-of-town contractor to come in?
No, and wearing our local hat, I hope in the ideal scenario would be where everyone hires locally and we have all the local contractors. Having said that, the scenario might be where that's not. I think what's great, though, is our local contractors have a leg up. Right. Vin Smith from Planning and David Morrison, Director of Planning, have had one-on-one meetings with the contractors. Right. There was a meeting, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago at the board chambers with all the contractors went up, and we talked about the rebuild process. So that way they understood the process, because the contractors in the county, we're on the same team. We're working for the resident. Right. So we need to make sure that the contractors understand the standards, they understand the process, and we're eliminating any bottlenecks or trouble points that we've had in the past. So I feel confident that with the local contractors we have, they're going to be able to work through the process pretty expeditiously. Having said that, if there's contractors out of town, out of the state that are going to come in, and they're working for our residents, we want to make sure they have the process that's streamlined as well. But some of the ones that we know locally, they're going to have an opportunity to really get ahead of it because they know the Napa landscape. They know, how to maneuver the process. But again, our commitment is to create a process that's easy, efficient, and less bureaucratic.
Wonderful. I haven't been counting, but streamline and flexible have been like the words of the hour. And you know what I'm going to ask. I'm not alone, I think, when I'm hearing those words and I'm thinking, well, if there's this group effort and unified plan to streamline and make things flexible, why can't that just continue going forward? And there's a bunch of contractors in their trucks right now clapping and going, yeah.
And I anticipated that question because it's a question that, quite honestly, people ask, and they should ask. As I said, with the crisis comes an opportunity as well. And for us, this is an opportunity to do better and be better. And where we can identify opportunities to streamline, we're going to carry that forward, right? The crisis happened, but now we can't control what happened in the past. We can only control what we do tomorrow and well into the future. And this is, I think, something that this Board of Supervisors is going to be very interested in understanding is how can we be better? How can we be more efficient? Because one of the things we ask ourselves, I look at the Board of Supervisors like the Board of Directors of an organization, of a business, an institution, and we're $500 million. So we need to make sure that, we're looking at these high-level things, and the process has been one that we always get questions on. And I think we want to make sure that we're being efficient. So, the horror stories that you hear about applications being turned back and forth and it being recirculated so many times, that's not efficient. We're not using our county resources efficiently either. So we're also looking at this. How can we organize ourselves more efficiently as an organization? And I think we're going to have some best practices that come out of this that we're going to be able to carry forward as we go forward. But what we'll do is once we go through this, we call it the hot wash. We sit down, we acknowledge what worked, what didn't, and how can we improve. And I'm really going to be interested in carrying some of the best practices that we're going through right now. So that way the new way of business is more efficient, it's more streamlined, and more flexible. And those are great buzzwords that sound great. But honestly, I think it's something that this Board of Supervisors is very interested in doing is we want good government. We want to be flexible. We want to be responsive. We have standards, right? And we can't compromise standards because, we've all been to communities where you look at and you say, how did that get approved, right? It does not fit. And you don't want that either. Right, you want good neighborhoods and good quality construction, but we're very fortunate that I think we have an opportunity here, to build smarter, to build more strategic, to build more efficiently, and we can do that, right? Because we have the right people at the table, and again, you have a county staff that is very receptive, and they've heard from the Board of Supervisors. We're not interested to do business as usual. We want to do business differently, more flexible, more responsive. And that is what's being demanded of us. And that, quite honestly, that's our job.
Right.
Are you seeing any kind of maybe influx of applications coming through for maybe residents that are here that want to open up maybe new ADUs or JDUs that will increase maybe a little bit of vacancy out here for?
Could be. We haven't heard that too much right now, but I think that's going to be a byproduct of the saturated housing market that we're going to have because, as you all know, we had a very low vacancy rate. And when you have some people that are displaced, Lee, you mentioned the number of earlier, that might put more pressure. So we have to think differently. And, look, housing for me is one of my biggest priorities on the Board of Supervisors. It was when I was on the City Council. And what we keep saying is we need more tools in the tool belt, right? Whether it's building new homes, secondary units, ADUs, or GDUs, we need it all, right? Because I think we're seeing a demographic. You said it earlier about the declining home ownership, and that's something that we have to keep our eye on. So we have to have a different housing mix and a different housing stock that's responsive to our community demographics. A lot of our friends, don't want the commitment of buying a home. Right. Well, that was bestowed upon me by my parents. You got to buy a home. You got to buy a home. You got to buy a home. That's success in their minds. Well, the millennials, the next generation, may not want to. So how do you address that issue? But we still need to create a sense of community because that's what I've learned. Whether it's the earthquake or the fire, you want good people living in your community. That's what makes it better.
Right. I might have cut you off there, Lee. I think you were going to say something.
Well, just the business as usual type of thing. It just reminds me of when I was in the corporate world as a vice president of sales. There was things that I came upon and I learned from my reports, and I said, well, why do we do that? And they said, that's the way it was always done. And I just was so exacerbated by that. And I said, we're not going to do that anymore. And I came up with this acronym, TWI, TWIWAD, the way it was always done. And I did one of the circles with a slash through it and distributed those little notepads to everybody. And so it's good that you're not going to do it the way that it's always been done just because of that.
You know what? You're right. And sometimes, especially in government, there's valid reasons why it's been done that way. But guess what? Sometimes there is not valid reasons why it's been done that way. And our job is to ask those questions of why have we always done it that way? And I believe in you're a lifelong learner. So you're always learning. But you have to ask those critical questions again. We have 1,500 employees at the county NAP, all great people, all talented people. But we also have to make sure that we're innovating, that we're doing things differently. And I think that was the feedback that we got from all our state and federal partners, the willingness in Napa County to think out of the box, to do things differently. And we're going to do that, right? And I think we've showed with the way we've managed the debris process, the recovery process. We're not taking out the same, tools that were in the tool belt, 10 years ago. We're putting new tools in the tool belt to respond differently. And to me, that's the charge I have as a board of supervisors. I want to leave this board in a better place than it was before, with more tools in the tool belt. Our community needs are changing constantly, but I think you have a citizenry that's very willing to be part of the solution and provide us new information. And to me, that the exchange of information has been phenomenal. Contractors have been emailing saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Residents have been emailing us, "Have you thought about this?" And we pass that on to our staff and say, "Can we do that differently?" Right? It's those thought-provoking questions that make us better. But you have to have a willingness to be better. And to me, that's what excites me about this county, a willingness to do better and be better.
I believe you were probably taking office with that intention in mind anyway, and then unfortunately, no, we would not wish these fires to have occurred, but I think that you're probably finding it much easier and streamlining, if I can throw that word in there, that process of being able to think outside the box even more aggressively than you otherwise would have been.
But I wanted to touch on something really quick and just moving talking about vehicles, okay? The Army Corps of Engineers, they move the vehicles away, they clean up the area, and then they put the vehicle back. They don't take the vehicle with. That Belia had mentioned, mentioned that in our meeting, that if you think that all the debris is going to go, well, yeah, but not the vehicle. Like, you have to make special plans, or and deal with it on another way.
I'll get an answer to that.
Okay.
The cases I've seen, I think if the vehicle was not harmed,
right,
or the vehicle can be salvaged,
right,
it still has four wheels, and there's one that comes to mind that's on Westgate. It will be moved, and there are different plans for that. But if the vehicle is charred,
right,
and it's just a frame of it, they're going to take that metal and put it into the category. So I have seen residents where the vehicles are included in the debris.
Okay.
I think what Supervisor Ramos was probably alluding to is those vehicles that are still intact and it still looks like a vehicle.
Okay.
Right? Those that don't, I think, are being removed. But I'll get you all a better answer to that with more certainty.
Okay. I just wanted to touch on that in case people are planning for the removal and debris removal. Okay, well, we're winding down. We have about probably less than 2 minutes now.
We should give that to Alfredo, because he's never at a loss for words, because it's part of his job description. And I don't know, there might be something that you want to say in these last few minutes that you want to make sure that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. For us, it's
Sure.
great to be able to get on the radio and provide information, and it's guys like you that give us the opportunity to do so. But I think one of the things that, in light of the debris in the rebuilding process, we also get questions of, are you going to go back retroactively and look at what can we do better? How can we be better prepared for these type of incidents? And we are. We're just not there yet right now. Right now, again, our emphasis has been on getting people signed up for debris removal, starting the rebuilding process. I think once that's done, I think you're going to see the board willing to talk about, we heard questions about, can we provide information better? How do you alert your residents when technology doesn't work? How can you prevent fires, because fires are going to happen? All those type of questions, I think we're going to have a forum and an opportunity to do so, to make sure that we're building better and we're a better community, more prepared, because we did a lot of things well. but there's also going to be some opportunities to be better. And we're going to have that discussion because we're already hearing it, and that's a good sign because to me that's showing that we're moving on to the recovery part a little bit quicker, which is great. And I just want to put that out there because we're getting a lot of questions about this, and I'm excited to have that conversation. And I think there's going to be some things that we take out from that conversation as well. Thank you all.
Well, hey, thank you, and we definitely learned a lot today. And we learned that definitely government is a dynamic situation. I tell you, it's always evolving and changing, and you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on. All right, well, we will be back next Monday at 11 a.m. KVON, 1440 a.m. I know Lee's going to be excited to be back next week, right?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't I be?
All right, folks. We will be back next week, 11 a.m., KVON, 1440 a.m.
Don't forget the party on the 30th, 1435 1st Street, 4 to 7 p.m. See you there.
And this is the Lee and Desi Real Estate Radio Show.